You're obsessed about this Jim Henson thing, aren't you? You want to talk about it?
Look down underneath you.
There's a man down there.
That's a puppeteer.
Jim Henson and his unique Muppets had become an act. When Sam and Friends went off the air in 1961, the Muppets kept busy doing television commercials.
You say you love Wilson certified bologna?
No, I don't fall for that stuff.
You will.
They were also getting booked on many of the television variety shows of the 60s, including The Ed Sullivan Show. And Jim's Muppets became regulars on The Jimmy Dean Show, a down-home country western variety show. The quick-witted piano-playing Rolf was featured with Jimmy Dean every week in a 7 to 8 minute segment.
You are a real good friend. Oh, you can always count on me, Jimmy.
Rolf was performed by Jim Henson, but since the Muppets were no longer lip-syncing to records, Jim had to learn to interact in character with a live performer.
I got the perfect friendship.
Ralph always was relaxed, happy, everything was okay, you know, and he loved to play the piano, but if it went wrong, then it was okay, you know, and I think that was largely, you know, my father. That's what he would try to do, you know, that's the way he was.
Jim Henson was a devoted family man. He'd married fellow puppeteer Jane Nebel in 1959. Soon, daughters Lisa and Cheryl were born, followed by Brian, John, and then Heather. When Jim's work, including a weekly spot on the Today Show, demanded he be in New York, the whole family came along.
When we started having babies, I always worked a little bit, but we very soon knew that we needed more people, and Jim had wanted to bring in other people anyway.
Jerry Jewell was brought in first. Jim hired Jerry to replace Jane as a performer. He then became Jim's head writer.
It was a very kind of crazy, flying by the seat of your pants kind of time. We would all go off and, you know, carry the stuff across town when you couldn't find cabs, and to the studios and set up and shoot, you know. So we were performing and we were doing everything.
Next, Jim hired master puppet builder Don Celine, and then 19-year-old Frank Oz joined the team.
I was big game hunting in Africa, fella.
Big game hunting?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, what game?
Monopoly. That's a big game in Africa, didn't you know that?
Ultimately, Frank Oz would become Jim's key performing partner. The magic of their collaboration could be seen with two characters, named Ernie and Bert.
Yeah, fishy, fishy, fishy. 3 fish, 4 fish, 5 fish.
Wow! Ernie, that's terrific. Let me try, okay?
Sure.
How do I do it?
Just make
It
sure.
was just kind of there. It was like playing catch, you know. He would throw, I would catch. I would throw, he would catch. And you can't explain why it feels good. It just does, and it feels right.
Yeah, fishy, 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 fishy!
You cold? We were so opposite. I was more of a, and to a degree still am, but as I get older I'm not, a bit more neurotic. Jim was more patient, very playful.
Ernie and Bert were created in 1969 for Sesame Street, a new kids show for public television.
Sunny day, sweeping the clouds away.
When the Children's Television Workshop put together a team of people to create a program for preschoolers, Jim Henson was brought into the mix. Joan Gans Cooney was in charge of the project.
I hired 3 producers, 3 very talented producers, all of whom had at one time or another been on Captain Kangaroo, so they really knew children's programming. And they said to me, do you know Jim Henson? And I said, I know his work. And they said, well, why don't we try to get him? And I said, we could get Jim Henson, I mean, because he was the best there was. He came to 1 or 2 of our seminars in the summer of '68, and it was this tall, bearded man with his sort of hippie way of dressing. You would notice him, let me say. And we talked him into it.
She plugged, you know, the whole Henson organization in at the very top because it just brought such a sense of fun to the whole project. The last thing we wanted to do is try and implant a camera in a classroom kind of effect.
A fireman is a person in your neighborhood. In your neighborhood.
I think that playfulness with life and with learning added an enormous dimension to the show that never would have happened without him.
Okay, this is near.
With Sesame Street, Jim Henson introduced a whole new gang of Muppets.
This is far.
C is for cookie, that's good enough for me.
Cookie Monster, Oscar the Grouch, and an 8-foot-tall yellow bird all grew out of Jim's fertile imagination.
But, like you, I'm not old enough to cross the street by myself. So
Jim hired puppeteer Carol Spinney to play Big Bird.
To me, that was the equivalent of, if I was a drummer, having some fellow say, I've got a little band from Liverpool, then would you like to be me drummer? Because it was Jim Henson. Jim Henson and the Muppets, to me, were the Beatles completely of the puppet world.
how can people know I'm coming if I don't have a horn?
Oscar, with this car, everybody knows you're coming.
The personalities of each Muppet is so defined. That makes it wonderful from an acting point of view because they're so kind of predictable.
Hi all, this is Kermit the Frog of Sesame Street News. And today
Kermit, the character Jim created years before, joined this new group of Muppets. By now, Kermit was a frog, complete with a collar and flippers. From the very beginning, Sesame Street had reinvented children's television.
And welcome to Once the Peace Theater. Me, your host, Alistair Cookie. And
the show was hip and funny and attracted young children as well as their parents. Sure, kids learned their numbers and ABCs, but Mom and Dad were also being entertained. And Hollywood's biggest stars were very eager to make a guest appearance.
Hi. I've been sent to interview Oscar the Grouch about his sock collection.
I love her attitude.
You want to kiss up to your kids, and you do anything. It's just, what do I have to do to get on the show? You want to do that for your children.
Jim's own children didn't mind that their father never stopped working. In addition to the Muppets, Jim also contributed some of the animated teaching pieces for the show.
He used to stay up almost all night, painting each and every little stroke for the numbers that would go, count up and then count back down again. And that was one of the really favorite ones.
Jim worked so hard, and he was not a workaholic. It's hard for people to understand. The reason Jim worked so hard is he loved it. He enjoyed it.
He always had such a ball when he was at work, and that was one reason why we used to love to go and visit him. And also, we were always welcome at work. No matter how young we were, we would hang around the shooting studio and in the workshop and even go to meetings and stuff and be playing in the corner, and he was always fine with that.
When we were growing up, we weren't very aware of my father being famous, that there was much more of a sense that he was always very involved in his work, and he loved what he did, and he always brought us into what he was doing.
He loved to play, and he loved to goof around. So I think we spent a lot of time goofing around as a family. He was also a very gentle and caring father. I remember even when he would work sort of endless hours, he'd pretty much always come home every night at some point to like tuck us in.
Whether or not he came home every night to tuck them in, I don't know. He certainly enjoyed being with them when he could. If they remember it as every night, that's nice, isn't it? I don't think it was every night.
In 1998, the Muppet family celebrated the 30th anniversary of Sesame Street, a show which could never have achieved such phenomenal success without Jim Henson and his Muppet creations.